All right, we're taking a look at some of the top players that will be available in our upcoming draft for our Strat-O-Matic Baseball League. These are 11 players who are very likely to go in the first 2 or 3 rounds, and some of them will almost certainly be top picks, top 2 or 3, 4 overall picks. Never know when the run on pitching starts, so it's hard to know exactly where these players will go. What we're doing is we have the 1956 and 1941 card sets as the base of our player pool, and we're adding to that several of the top all-time great players so that we get a little bit of an element of all-time greats within our season, and that gives you the fun of having somebody like a Sandy Koufax facing Ted Williams without complete all-time greats where every lineup top to bottom is completely stacked with Hall of Famers. So we'll get started here with Ted Williams. Ted Williams of the 1941 Red Sox, the last player to hit 400. He hit 406 and 41 with a mind-boggling 553 on base, 735 slugging, 37 home runs, 145 walks, and only 27 strikeouts. Ted hit 386 with a 545 on base, 718 slugging versus right-handers, 454, 535, 605 versus lefties. What you'll notice with a lot of these top players is they are ballpark dependent, the home run hitters, and frequently you'll see those ballpark diamonds at 8 and 10. So depending on the ballpark that they're playing in, it can make a big difference in terms of whether they'll get their full power. But you'll notice, though, that Ted Williams is not as ballpark dependent against lefties. So I think there's no doubt that Williams is the best hitter in this player pool. And you could make the argument that this is one of the top 2 hitting cards that Strat-O-Matic has ever put out. Babe Ruth 1920, arguably better because he has even more power. And there's something about being in scoring position in the batter's box that's hard to duplicate and hard to compete against. So Ted will go number 1 overall, right? Well, maybe. He certainly could. However, he is a 3 in left field. That means that 30% of all left field X chances are going to get by him and become hits. In a tough league environment where every team is good, it's hard to give up those extra hits. But he's certainly going to get a lot of extra hits back for you. So those are some of the decisions that one would have. But Ted's going to get a lot of on-base chances. Of course, he's not going to steal, so you need somebody to move him over and drive him in. But he can get a lot of RBIs, especially against lefties with all those singles in that 3 column. Obviously a great player. I don't know if any of these players are no doubt for sure would be the number 1 overall pick. It kind of depends on the team and the approach that they want to take. But they're all great players, and they're all going to be able to help a team tremendously. Here's Mickey Mantle of the 1956 New York Yankees. And this was one of Mantle's top 2 seasons, maybe his best season. He hit 353 with a 464 on base, 705 slugging, 52 home runs. He had a 737 slugging versus righties. Typical of Mantle, though, he was a little bit better versus lefties. 375, 474 on base, 642 versus lefties. He is a 2 in center field, -3 arm. With air adjustment, that would be an E3. I'll point out quick with the air adjustment chart that Strat-O-Matic put out in their winter newsletter, it really helps even the playing field, especially in a league like this where we have different players from different decades. Williams, by the way, with the adjustment, is a E8 in left field, not the card at E13. So yeah, as a 2 in center field, 15% of those X chances are going to be hits. And center fielders do get more X chances than corner outfielders. But that's a lot of home runs and a lot of power. Personally, I was a little disappointed when this card came out because of the 1-7 spot that is almost completely blank. I like to see at least 2 sevens available from the top hitters. That's being pretty picky, and I'm sure over the course of a large sample size, the card is going to play out exactly the way that Mantle's stats played out. He did do this in Yankee Stadium, so those home run chances will likely add up to about 52 home runs if you have them in a good hitter's park. Over the course of 154 games, of course, we're only playing 42. Great player, obviously, Mickey Mantle, legendary player, and it's fun to see what his card looked like before all the injuries came in. He was a tremendous ball player. And we go from one Yankee center fielder to another inner tier first ballot Yankee center fielder. It's Joe DiMaggio of the 1941 New York Yankees. Great year for DiMaggio as they won the World Series, 357, 440, 643, 30 home runs, 11 triples, 43 doubles. He's a 1 in center field with a -4 arm. That is a cannon. And with adjustment, that's an E6. He's better versus lefties than righties, but he's still great versus righties. 342 batting average, 621 versus righties, 391, 482, 696 versus lefties. And as we were saying with so many of these hitters, a little bit ballpark dependent with the power. Not quite as much, though, as with Williams and Mantle, and as we're about to see with Barry Bonds. But great ball player, obviously. Not going to steal you a base, but it's going to hit a lot of triples, though. So in some ways, you're going to get himself into scoring position. So that's Joe DiMaggio of the 41 Yankees. Here's Barry Bonds of the 1993 San Francisco Giants. This was Bonds before all the controversy and alleged this and that I'm not going to get into. This was an MVP season for Bonds in 1993. He hit 336 with a 458 on base, 677 slugging, 46 home runs, 38 doubles, and 29 stolen bases. Against righties, he hit 343 with a 481 on base, 717 slugging versus righties. Not as good against lefties, but still 326 batting average with a 619 slugging. The stealing of bases value that Bonds brings is something extra that you're not going to get with a DiMaggio or Mantle or Williams. 17 as his stolen base rate if he gets his lead, which is a star 3 through 6. 13 as a secondary, running 1 to 7. It's nice to have that 1 in center field, that 1 defensively. He is a left field 1 with a -2 arm and an E4 with adjustment. Not as big of an adjustment because he's more of a modern player. Again, I really love that air adjustment chart. If you look deeper on Bonds, you'll start to see how much potential this card has. The ballpark home runs in San Francisco in 1993 with Strat-O-Matic was home run 1 to 6 for lefties. So if you put him in a Yankee Stadium or a Polo Grounds or somewhere where the ball really flies, that's going to be a lot more home runs than 46 per 154, 162 games. And Bonds, if you look up on Baseball Reference, his road stats that year, he hit 359, 507 on base with a 740 slugging on the road. So this card is going to really jump up in value in a hitter's park. If you're not in a hitter's park, it's going to be much more likely to give you the stats that he had in 93 in San Francisco, which is still great stats to get. Again, he's not as good versus lefties. He still will get some home runs versus lefties, especially in a good park for him. He is going to be stymied in a pitcher's park to a degree. If I was going up against Bonds, I would have a pitcher's park and I'd throw a lot of lefties at him, and it's going to give me a better chance than righties against in a hitter's park. So some of the decisions that you have to make. The left field one is not as valuable as a center fielder, but that's a valuable card. Barry Bonds of the 1993 San Francisco Giants. Here's Joe Morgan, 1975 Diamond Gems set with the 1975 Cincinnati Reds. 75's out of print. A little more difficult to find the actual printed card. So we're going with the Diamond Gems version. He is a second base 1E10 with adjustments. He had 327 with a 466 on base, 508 slugging, 17 home runs, 27 doubles, but 67 stolen bases. You look at that stolen base rate, 4 to 6 to get his lead. If he gets his lead, it's a 19, and 14 as a secondary lead. So when you consider against righties, he had a 483 on base. He's going to get a lot of stolen bases. Look at it like this. If he gets his lead, even against the maximum you can have as a hold, with pitcher catcher with being 5 is the maximum you can have, -2 for holding him, he still has a 60% chance of successfully stealing a base if he gets his lead with that 19. So he's a menace on the base paths. And as a second base one in the up the middle premium position, you could make the argument that Morgan could be the #1 overall pick. Will he go #1? I don't know. It's hard to say, but it's a super valuable player. And if a team gets him towards the middle end of the first round, you're really getting a bargain. There's only so many great second basemen in this league. Jackie Robinson would be probably the #2 second baseman. And even next year when we bring in 1911, you have Eddie Collins, but Morgan's going to stand out up the middle for several seasons in this league, if not every season. It's a valuable player when you consider there's always going to be great outfielders, but there's only so many middle infielders who can really be that much of a dynamic difference maker for you. It's up to you. Do you take the second baseman or do you take the outfielder who can give you a lot of home runs? And right on cue, speaking of which, here's Willie Mays. And Willie Mays obviously brings a lot to the table. This is the 1965 Willie Mays with the San Francisco Giants. Center field one with a -5 cannon arm, and it's an E5 after adjustments. -5 is truly a cannon, and he did have one of the greatest arms, most experts say, ever. I think that Roberto Clemente might be the only one with a -6 arm that we've seen that's in late 60s, early 70s, and he was in right field, but this is a -5 in center field. There is one other player that we're going to talk about in this video, Pete Reeser, who also is a center field one with a -5 arm. So that's something special. 52 home runs for Willie Mays in 1965. And similar to what we were talking about with Barry Bonds, both of them playing in San Francisco, in 65, home runs were only 1 through 8 for righties. And so in a good ballpark for him, he's going to hit more home runs than the rate that he has with this card. He hit 320 with a 395 on base, 670 slugging versus righties, 405 on base versus lefties, a 309 batting average, 579 versus lefties. He's not going to get on base as much. He didn't get on base as much as obviously as a Ted Williams, but as a Barry Bonds or a Mickey Mantle or several other of these players. But that's a lot of power out of a premium defensive center fielder. And similar to what I've been saying, you could easily make the argument that he would be the #1 overall pick. It really depends on the individual GM and what they want to do, how they want to shape their team. You could make a really credible argument for saying, okay, you show me a whole bunch of lefty hitters. I'm going to take a guy like Mays. I'm going to find a ballpark where righties hit home runs and lefties don't, and I'm going to build around Willie Mays. That could be a very successful strategy. There are a lot of righties in this league environment who do hit home runs, certainly not at the pace like Willie Mays. So that could be a little bit of an issue. Of course, nobody knows what kind of ballpark you have until after the end of the draft. So that could be a sneaky good strategy to have in the draft, especially for the team that gets Willie Mays first. You say, okay, I'm going to limit the home runs that Bonds and Mantle get. I mean, sure, there's still 4, 5, 6 no-doubters for them. But then I'm going to give the ballpark home runs to my guys, my righty hitters, and limit the lefties. It could give you a really good advantage. And then the same thing, you look for pitchers who are tough on lefties. It could be a winning strategy to go with. It's Willie Mays, the 65 San Francisco Giants. I mentioned him before. Here's Jackie Robinson, second baseman with the Brooklyn Dodgers. He was a 2E10 with adjustment. Great stolen base man, 38 stolen bases, 12 triples, 38 doubles, 16 home runs for Jackie Robinson. This was his MVP season. He had 342 with a 432 on base and 528 slugging. 352 versus righties with a 442 on base, 552 slugging. Again, this is a very valuable up-the-middle guy to have. The stolen base rate is going to be great for you. It's a really, really valuable player. So that's Jackie Robinson of the Brooklyn Dodgers in 1949. We'll be back with the next video talking about some more of the top position players in the upcoming draft.